Have you ever felt guilty for being a bad environmentalist when you accidentally leave the water on, or lights on, or eat beef once in a while? There's probably a reason for that, and the reason is a big oil company. Hello, welcome to Screen Share, where you look at my screen and I share things I've learned over the past 7 years as a climate activist. Hi, my name is Kiana, and today we're going to be talking about the carbon footprint. This is one of honestly my favorite topics to discuss just because I think it's incredibly interesting and it's one of those things that just is never not amusing to me. Let's start off with what the carbon footprint is, right? So, a carbon footprint is basically how you, as an individual, count the amount of greenhouse gas emissions you are sending into the atmosphere. So, that's adding in things like what you're eating, how much you travel, how you travel. Do you go by public transportation, individual means? How much do you walk? How much do you buy new things? It's things like our daily activities that produce greenhouse gas emissions. It's all of that in a calculator, and then calculating this is how much greenhouse gases I emit as an individual on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, it doesn't matter. But I want to give a precursor here and say that the carbon footprint is scientifically accurate. So when you usually go on to a carbon footprint calculator, yes, you're going to learn how much you individually contribute to climate change or the greenhouse gases or the greenhouse effect. And while that can be a good tool, today we're going to be talking about the fact that number one, this was popularized by British Petroleum or a big oil company. And number two, why was it beneficial for them to launch this campaign? I want to start off with the concept of an ecological footprint. So, some people believe that British Petroleum actually started the idea of a carbon footprint, which is not technically true. In the 2000s, the idea of an ecological footprint appeared in science and scientific theory, but it was used in a more holistic scale. So, the ecological footprint of a community or a society. The idea of a carbon footprint, which was popularized by BP or British Petroleum, was looking at that idea and moving it specifically to the individual lens. So, this was the big turn towards individual actions. This is where you would see things like make sure if you want to be environmentally friendly, you recycle all your things at home and you turn off your lights and you turn off your water and you make sure to take shorter showers and all of these little actions that we can do. And I'm not saying that these actions are not productive, but I am saying that they are not the most productive way to go about solving this big environmental issue, right? So, why was this turn to individual action so convenient? Because it asks us to look at the climate crisis not through a systemic lens. Looking at the climate crisis through a systemic lens will very quickly lead you to oil companies like BP, like Shell, like Chevron, like even energy companies like Meralco or um, different San Miguel Corporation, which is another really big energy company here in the Philippines. And that changes from place to place. But what I'm trying to say here is that shifting the action point to the individual shifts focus away from these big companies. And so they get away scot free while you're thinking, oh my gosh, I accidentally left my lights on for an extra 2 minutes. How is the world gonna survive? The world's gonna be just fine, babe. Those those industries really need to switch to renewable alternatives. Those things need to topple before you feel that guilt. And I think I want to talk a little bit here about being a consumer. So, as individuals in a late capitalistic society, Obviously, we are all consumers of things. We all use electricity, at least those of us who have access to it. We all use water and a lot of these renewable and limited resources. And this carbon footprint calculator, reducing your carbon footprint, is teaching us how to be good consumers in the sense that we consume less. We consume in a way that doesn't really shake the system. But these carbon footprint calculators and these metric based systems to understand our impacts don't actually teach us to be system builders. For example, it would be a lot more impactful as an individual for me to lobby to my local city to put up bike lanes and more people would be biking around than to me falling into a guilt shame than for me falling into a guilt shame cycle of inaction. And I really want to focus on this point because I think it's really, really important. A lot of people fall into this cycle of feeling guilty about not knowing, not doing the right things, not being the perfect consumer to the point that it doesn't actually produce any action. It leaves us in this sense of guilt, in this sense of shame, without actually moving us towards, okay, I need to do something. And that's exactly why BP launched this campaign in 2004. Because number one, it shifts the focus away from them. Number two, it keeps us feeling guilty instead of pointing the finger at them. And number three, individual action is really, really easy to comprehend, right? When we think of things from an individual level, it's so convenient, it falls right into place. Everything is in our control. But the much more inconvenient and painful truth is that these systems are much larger than ourselves, and we need to understand them if we want to dismantle them. And doing individual action, while it's amazing, is not where things end. It is not where everything ties up neatly in a bow, that your participation in moving towards a better and greener future should end. This is why I think the idea of individual action has been pushed so repetitively over the past century, I want to say. Century ba? Decade? No, decade. I don't know. Which one's 10 years? Anyway, my point is, we kind of try to push this individual action rhetoric, but what ends up happening is that we are stuck in that individual action mindset, and we can no longer zoom out and understand that the system is much bigger than individual action, and that collective action can actually bring so much more to the table. There are many different collective wins that I want to share with you guys today, but I want to share a very specific one that I hold dear. So, recently, the International Court of Justice, or the ICJ, actually did its first ruling on climate change. It was a landmark ruling and something that me and my friends watched like it was the Super Bowl. Like, we were all on the same Zoom call watching, listening in to see what the ICJ would say about climate change. And luckily it was generally very justice forward. Granted, it was not perfect. Nothing really will be in a statement of that proportion, but it definitely felt like a win for the climate justice community. And that ruling actually started from young people in Haiti who pushed for the ICJ to create that ruling. It didn't start with or it didn't happen out of nowhere. It came from young people who asked for this ruling, to ask for this statement, to ask for something to prove that we are justified. And this is now being used for different cases to argue um, the rights of nature, the rights of young people to breathe safe air, to live in a safe environment. And it truly was a large change that came from just a small group of young people. And so individual actions can change things, but it's also important to understand who really produces the emissions. And this has been here on the screen since earlier, but I want to talk about it now. So, BP, British Petroleum, through their campaign Beyond Petroleum, posted this tweet. The first step to reducing your emissions is to know where you stand. Find out your hashtag carbon footprint with our new calculator and share your pledge today. And a Twitter user, Andrew Henderson, says, I pledge to not spill 4.9 million barrels of oil into the Gulf of Mexico, which is something that British Petroleum did. And so the history of these oil companies are really tragic and evil Disney villain esque when you really come down to it. But yeah, I think this really encapsulates the issue here where they're telling us, okay, you need to know where you stand. You need to do the calculator. You need to take on the burden of understanding how things are going to change without us changing, without us, the people who are actually calling the shots on the climate crisis, without us changing. And so I guess if you have time today, try to research, look up who are the people who produce the emissions in your country or in your localities, and understand who really holds the power, and understand that although your individual actions matter even more when they're going towards breaking that system of power. Really quickly, I want to talk about circles of influence. So, this is something I share in almost every lecture that I give, at schools, at universities. It's basically, I want you to imagine three circles, right? The smallest circle is your circle of control. Your circle of control is things that self explanatorily you control, right? Your thoughts, your actions, maybe even your family or your household, the food you eat, the things you buy. And this can, in fact, make changes. For example, when large groups of people refuse to buy things that are made unethically, those brands often have to pivot, whether or not they are actually pivoting in action or just in marketing. That is another conversation. But the things we buy or don't buy do have an effect. The things we do or don't do add up to some point. And so our individual actions do matter. But I want to talk about the other circles here. So after your circle of control, one circle bigger is your circle of influence. Your circle of influence are the things that you can change, somehow as an individual. Your school, your friends, your larger family, your environment, your community, your home. This is things like starting community gardens, community initiatives, um, doing household level changes, even school level changes, barangay level changes, village level changes. These are things that really matter so, so much. These collective actions don't only serve to lessen the carbon emissions, but also to influence everyone involved and everyone who is just around those initiatives. I've seen and I've been a part of these things enough to know that that excitement of change and of possibility, when it comes to community initiatives, is really contagious. I think that's one of the biggest things that we need to use. We need to magnify in this fight, right? And the last circle or the biggest circle is your circle of concern. So these are the things you're concerned about, but you may not really be able to reach yet. Things like national governance, things like international governance, things like these big oil companies. But your circle of influence doesn't stay as it is. As you continue doing the things, reaching the communities, your circle of influence will grow. For me, I started off just in my school, and I have already influenced national government policies through, for example, the National Determined Contributions or the NDCs, which I was one of the youth consultants on. My point here is that there is so much growth to be had, right? Your circle of influence can continue growing into your circle of concern until hopefully one day everything you're concerned about you can change. And while that's very most likely impossible, it's a good target to have. Lastly, I want to talk about how this British Petroleum campaign really boils down to wanting us to ask the wrong questions. Instead of asking who's at fault, how can these things truly change? How are these systems built? We are taught to ask, what can I do? How should I feel guilty? How should I change? How should I contort my already very difficult working class life to be more sustainable? And while the people that do take time out of their difficult lives to be more sustainable, to live more sustainably, are much appreciated, these influences, these things outside of ourselves, also need to be understood for us to really topple these systems of power. And so, if anything you take away from this video, make sure to ask the right questions. Ask the questions that will really unravel the systems and the ideas that are being presented to you. I hope you learned something from this video. And yeah, if you could please subscribe, like the video, comment, all those kinds of things, it would be so, so appreciated. Um, I think one of the goals of the Arrow project is hopefully to use YouTube as a fundraising thing. Although we're very, very far from that right now. But if you could help us, that would be so amazing. Thank you so much and stay cool.